Hello students. In the last video we showed you how to add integers by thinking of positive numbers as being money and negative numbers as being debts, and just combining money and money or debts and so on. A lot of students actually prefer using a number line. So if you can put that number line in your head, so 0 in the middle, negative numbers to the left, positive numbers to the right, this is another good way to think about adding numbers. So we'll start by just adding positive numbers. So for example, looking at this number on the left, 5 plus 3, the first number is always the starting number. So I use my little green dot. That's where I'm going to start from. So I start at 5. And if I'm adding a positive, it means I move to the left on the number line. I'll put my red dot at where I finish up. So I'll show you how I got there. Plus 1, plus 2, plus 3. So 5 plus 3 is 8. Let me try a different one. Let me try negative 2 plus 7. So my green dot starts at negative 2. My red dot, I've got to move to the right 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I end up at positive, down here, end up at positive 5. Another way to think of that, by the way, if I'm adding 7 onto negative 2, is to say, well, adding on 2 gets me to 0, and then I have to add on another 5, and I get the same answer. Okay, so why don't you, if you don't have a number line in front of you, you can look at mine, or you can draw your own and maybe use your fingers, but go ahead and try the remaining questions on this page on your own, please. Okay, let's see how you went. So 4 plus 1 means I start at positive 4. And if I'm adding 1, it takes me to positive 5. I think to save a little bit of time, I'll just go through the answers. Starting at negative 5 and adding 4, starting at negative 5, adding 4, that takes me to negative 1. Starting at negative 8 and adding 5 takes me to negative 3. Starting at negative 5 and adding nothing means I don't go anywhere, so I stay at negative 5. Starting at 0 and adding 9 takes me to positive 9. And starting at negative 6 and adding 3 takes me to negative 3. So that's how we add a positive. Basically, it means the first number is where you start, and then you move to the right. What if you're adding a negative? Let's do the first one or two together, then you'll have a go at the rest of them. So here I start at 5, so I put my green dot at 5. Now if I'm adding a negative number, that's like basically being given a bill, which means I'm going to end up going to the left, in this case by 3 units. 1, 2, 3. So 5 plus negative 3 leaves me at positive 2. Now here's something worth noticing, that adding negative 3 has exactly the same effect as subtracting 3. So you can always think of adding a negative as the same as subtracting, and vice versa. Okay, let's do the second one together. Okay, so I start at 2, so I'll move this guy out of the way. Starting at 2, and I'm adding negative 5. That means I've got to go back to the left 5 because I'm adding a debt, so I'm going to end up with less money. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that leaves me at negative 3. So whenever you're adding a negative number and using a number line, you got to go that distance to the left. Okay, go ahead, stop the video, and have a go at the remaining 6 questions on your own, please. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to do this just using my pen to save a bit of time. So I'm starting at 12, which in fact isn't even on my number line. So I've got to think that I'm somewhere out here, and I'm going back 7. So if I start at 12, I go back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That leaves me at positive 5. Or as I said before, adding a negative is the same as subtracting. So 12 subtract 7 is 5. I start at 0 and I go back 4. Well, that takes me to negative 4. I start at negative 1 and go back 1. That's going to take me to negative 2. I start at negative 5 on the number line and go back 2. That's going to take me to negative 7. I start at 7 on the number line, go back 1. That takes me to positive 6. And I start at negative 2 on the number line and go back 3. That's going to leave me at negative 5. Okay, and a bit more practice on the next page. So here we have a mix of the 2 types of questions. So if you're adding a positive number, you move to the right. And if you're adding a negative number, you move to the left. So stop the video, have a go, and we'll check answers once you've finished. Okay, let's see how you went. So here we're adding a positive. So I start at negative 5, and I add 2, which means I'm going to end up at negative 3. I start at 8, I add 1. That means we're going to end up at 9 on the number line. I start at negative 2, and I'm adding a negative, which means I'm going to go back to the left. Negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7. I start at 3 on the number line, and I'm adding a negative, so I go back to the left. So starting at 3, go back 4. That puts me at negative 1. Starting at 0 and going back 2 puts me at negative 2. Adding 0 doesn't change anything, so I stay at negative 8. I start at negative 3 on the number line. I go back another 4. That's going to put me at negative 7. And I start at 8 on a number line, and I go back 2. Or I can just think of that as being the same as 8 subtract 2, which is positive 6. So there's a couple of different ways to think about adding integers. And the secret is now open up your textbook, find an exercise on adding integers, and just do lots and lots and lots of practice. Okay, in the next video, we'll be teaching you how to subtract integers.